Hello everyone. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. So what I want to do today is I want to share with you an idea about the industry that I'm lucky enough to find myself in. I want to share with you an idea about the future of education. But the next 15 minutes, I'm not going to be getting out my crystal ball and making a wise, mystical prediction of the future, nor am I going to throw up an Excel spreadsheet and give you a data-driven, analytical forecast of the future. What I want to do over the next 15 minutes is I want to set out a vision of what education can be, looking forward to the future by understanding what's around us now and what's behind us. I want to set out a vision of how education can create sound minds in sound bodies. So as Vera said, my name is Maxted Neal, and over the course of my career I've operated across a wide variety of different educational contexts. I have coached sport, I've taught undergraduate and postgraduate education, I have facilitated executive education, and over the course of this career something's been nagging away in the back of my mind. Something that I can't quite ignore anymore. Something that's telling me that education in its current form is failing our youth. And where this started is when I failed in education, and I failed quite spectacularly. I went to 3 different secondary schools. I struggled with mental health. I never ever thought I'd make it to higher education and university, let alone become an educator. I was so convinced that I wouldn't make it to university that while most of my colleagues found out their A-level or secondary school results with their families, I found out mine on a break from my night shift where I was working at that time. But by some miracle, I managed to get there. I managed to get to university. Unfortunately, this is where my failure in education dropped off a cliff. I really suffered with mental health, really struggled, to the point where I dropped out after a year. No purpose, no direction, no idea of who I was or where I wanted to go. And if it hadn't been for the support of my amazing family, as well as 4 fantastic educators, Andy, Toby, Brendan, and Jake, I wouldn't be where I was today, or where I am today. But the problem is that not everyone gets an amazing supportive family. And not everyone gets the Jake, Andy, Brendan, and Toby. So how can we go from a system that is systematically failing our youth to one that is systematically succeeding for our youth? And in order to do that, we need to understand what's coming up. We need to understand what education can be like in the future. And the way we can do that is looking at something called signals of change. Now, the reason why I'm not making a prediction, the reason why I'm not making a forecast of what education can be like, is because the Institute for the Future suggests that the future is already all around us and visible in something called signals of change. And signals of change can be anything. Signals of change can be a disruptive new product, an innovative new organisation, or a groundbreaking new government policy. And the crucial part of understanding the future is seeking out these signals of change and adapting to them and embracing them. Let me tell you a story of what happens when this goes wrong. It's a story about a man called William Orton. And William Orton was the president of the Western Union in 1867. And he was presented by a young inventor, he was presented with a signal of change, a new invention. The inventor was a chap called Alexander Graham Bell, and he was presenting the telephone. And when he presented the telephone to William Orton, William said, "That's not going to catch on. It's a little more than a toy." And he had the opportunity to buy the patent for the telephone for $100,000, and he passed it up. 2 years later, he bought that patent for slightly more. In fact, 24,900,000 more, and he called it a bargain. And this is what we need to do. Those of us who seek out, those of us who engage with and willingly adapt to signals of change will be the pioneers of the future. Those of us who ignore, disparage, and dismiss signals of change will be left behind. So where are these signals of change within education? Well, the first signal of change happened over 2,300 years ago. I said we were going to be looking back, I just neglected to mention quite how far back. So when education was first conceptualized or thought about as a philosophy by Socrates and Plato, they set out the purpose of education very clearly. And what they said was it was to attain knowledge. The purpose of education is to attain knowledge, which is great, and absolutely, yes it is, and that is still a belief that prevails to this day. But our first signal of change comes when Aristotle developed his own divergent, disruptive, innovative philosophy of education. Aristotle said, yes, absolutely, the purpose of education was to attain knowledge, but it was also to achieve goodness of intellect and goodness of character. The irony is that we still have not adapted this signal of change almost 2,300 years later. Crucially, what they all agreed on, however, was that the definition of education was to create sound minds in sound bodies. You impressed that I made it this far through a TED Talk without giving you a definition of something? I am. But this principle, this philosophy of education forms the foundation upon which this idea for the vision of the future is built on. And it has three pillars of what education can be like in order to achieve sound minds in sound bodies. And the first of these is the idea that we need to develop skills through teaching knowledge. As I'm sure you've heard from the speakers that have come before me, employers are crying out for skilled individuals. What we're seeing now is that students and people leaving education are no longer valuable because of the knowledge they have, but the skills they have. So what is the signal of change that means that we need this? Well, it's something called the democratization of knowledge. And in describing it as that, I've fallen foul of one of the problems with education at the moment, in that we use jargon and we use academic language in order to gatekeep this knowledge. So what do I mean by democratization of knowledge? Well, let me ask you, if you want to find something out, if you want to learn something new, what do? Where do you go? Do you consult your old exercise books from school, have a look through your textbooks, or give Mrs. Smith from year 3 a quick call? Hi, Mrs. Smith, I was just wondering, do you know anything about Bitcoin? It's Max from year 3. Excuse me. No, you don't. You go on Google at the first level. You search it. And then once you've Googled it, you might go on YouTube and watch an introductory video about it. If you really want to know about it, on the second level, you might go to something like the Khan Academy or Udemy and get some real in-depth knowledge. But the real signal of change that we have to adapt to is the open access movement within academic journals. Previously, this knowledge, this academic knowledge, the frontiers of human knowledge had been gatekept. You can only access it for quite a large fee or through formal education. But now, anyone can go on the internet, type in something they'd like to learn about, and access the frontiers of human knowledge. And this is something we have to adapt to. We have to teach our students how to be creative, how to collaborate, how to communicate effectively and think critically, because this is what employers are asking for. They're not asking for students who can perform trigonometry. We need to develop skills through knowledge. The reason why I say that is because this is not to say there is no value in acquiring knowledge. I absolutely wouldn't want to disparage the ideas of Socrates and Plato. I don't think I'm quite qualified to do that. But what we need to do is we need to use knowledge as a vehicle through which we can teach skills and build skills. So that's the first pillar of this idea, this vision for the future of education. And the second one is the idea that we need to teach students not what to learn, but how to learn. We need to teach students to learn to learn. The other speakers that have been on stage today are going to talk about and have already spoken about how rapidly the world is changing at a pace we've never seen before. And we have to be able to adapt to these changes, adapt to the way in which the world is changing. So what's the signal of change here? We know it's changing, but how can we see this? Well, again, I'll ask you a question. How many times did you interact with a screen today? As you were finding out how to get to this venue, as you were buying your tickets, accessing your ticket and showing it. How many times did you interact with your screen today versus 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago? The world is changing at an unbelievable pace. And to be honest, we don't know what's coming. So we have to be able to learn to learn. What we start learning, what we start teaching at the beginning of a 4-year degree could be outdated by the end of it. What we need to do is we need to teach students how to turn events into experience. Employers are crying out for people with experience, but that doesn't come from just being present at an event. It comes from actively learning, knowing how to learn, and turning those events into experience. So that's the second pillar. We need to teach students how to learn to learn. The third pillar of this vision for the future of education is one that's most personal to me and one that I think is most important. It's the idea of enriching the self. So if we go back to Aristotle, what we want to develop in our students is we want to create this goodness of intellect and goodness of character, creating sound minds in sound bodies. Education should not just provide purpose and direction, but empower students to find their own. But more concerningly, the signal of change is that mental health issues are on the rise, something that I experienced. A study by the American Psychological Association looked at mental health issues within adolescents, looking at individuals from 12 to 17 years old. And what they found was really worrying. A 72% increase in serious psychological distress, a 54% increase in clinical diagnoses of depression, and a 47% increase in suicidal thoughts. And that's just over the last 10 years. This is not an acceptable state of affairs. This is not just a signal of change, but a signal that we must change what we do in education. We simulate the pressures of life fantastically with the exams and the pressures and the social aspects of education, but what we do a terrible job is teaching students how to cope with it. Teaching them resilience, teaching them to find their purpose, find their direction, what motivates them, giving them a reason to be in our classrooms other than the fact that they're forced to be in our classrooms. There is a reason that Aristotle included music, arts, theatre and sports as a key part of the curriculum. But this relentless focus that we have in education on exam results and league tables and judging our students by their ability to pass exams is robbing our youth of their formative years and not enriching the self. There's a famous proverb that if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, you'll forever think it's stupid. So how are we judging our fish? Not just our fish, but our elephants, our rhinos, our ants, all the different animals, because academia isn't right for everyone. These three pillars are fundamentally intertwined and inherently work together. Skills can be developed through the process of enriching the self. We have to learn in order to generate these skills, in order to take these skills away from us. Education can be better. If we want to create sound minds and sound bodies, we must be better. We must deliver skills through knowledge. We must teach students how to learn. If we want to create sound minds and sound bodies, we have to enrich the self. And ultimately we must do this if we want better leaders, leading better people, inhabiting a better society.